My name is Ben Richards, and I served in the Army for 16 years. I grew up here in Idaho. I grew up in Idaho Falls. I graduated from Hillcrest High School in 1994, and then went from there to West Point, and graduated from West Point in 2000. I was commissioned in 2000 into the Armor and Cavalry branch of the Army, which means I served in the tank units and the reconnaissance units for the Army. I served in Iraq in 2006 and 2007 as a cavalry troop commander. I commanded about 100 soldiers with 17 armored striker vehicles, is what we call them. We were part of the surge there, and while I was there, I had 2 of my vehicles destroyed from improvised explosive devices. And then I was retired from the Army in August of 2012. I was sufficiently injured from traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress that I was given a permanent and total disability rating of over 100%, and was subsequently medically retired from the Army in 2012 as a major. While I was serving in Iraq, my cavalry troop was sent to Baqubah, Iraq, which at the time was the declared Al-Qaeda capital for their future Islamic Caliphate. During that period of time, we had about 4 or 5 months of very intense fighting. We were actually outnumbered by Al-Qaeda about 4 to 1 in terms of combat soldiers to active insurgent fighters. And my first concussion for mild traumatic brain injury was caused by a suicide car bomb. A sedan laden with hundreds of pounds of explosives and driven by a suicide bomber impacted into my Stryker armored vehicle. Totally destroyed the vehicle. Amazingly, I and the other 4 soldiers in the vehicle survived. We kept all of our parts and pieces, but we'd all suffered some concussions. And at that point in the war, we really didn't think a lot of mild traumatic brain injury. It was just something that you took a hit and you just kept going. So the fact the next day I was out back in the fight again, really suffering a lot of symptomology. I mean, I really couldn't see straight, had difficulty standing up straight. I was nauseous, vomiting. About 2 or 3 weeks later, hit another improvised explosive device and damaged our vehicle so significantly it was what we call coated out. The Army threw it away. It wasn't worth repairing cost-wise. That IED, blew a hole between the driver's legs. It blew the gunner completely out of the vehicle. Ejected the whole machine gun mount, about a 150-pound mount on top of the gunner. Again, we all survived. We all had all of our parts and pieces. It turned out pretty damaged. When I got home, I was stationed at Fort Lewis at the time. I was given a very cursory medical evaluation. It was really just filled out a questionnaire. You saw a counselor for a few moments, and that was it. They decided that I had post-traumatic stress disorder, which I did, but they pointed out they were pretty confident that I did not have traumatic brain injury. And when the military talks about traumatic brain injury, in reality, when they talk about it, a TBI is an event. It's not a condition. So they recognized that I had 2 mild traumatic brain injury events, but they told me I didn't have any brain damage, that I wasn't suffering anything from those TBIs, that everything I was experiencing was just post-traumatic stress disorder. Kind of what we recognize now as a pretty typical injury profile, but I was in a great deal of pain on a daily basis. I basically was having debilitating headaches almost every day. I had pain throughout my body. I was fatigued, I wasn't sleeping, I was depressed, I was emotionally volatile. I had real difficulty with mood regulation, with volatility, with impulse control. Memory-wise, I had just a number of cognitive deficits. We could be having this conversation and I would just stop mid-sentence and not even be aware that we had been having a conversation. So when I was still in the Army, I was provided really the most effective care that anyone gets in the Army. The fact that only about 300 soldiers a year get the same level of care that I was afforded. I went through quite a few different prescription drugs. I think in total about 18 different drugs, 4 at a time. None of them was particularly effective. In fact, 8 of them may cause suicidal thoughts or actions on the warning labels, and in fact did have a suicidal episode based off of one of the drugs that I was taking. It was, as soon as I went off the drug, it resolved the issues. I went through all of the psychotherapies that are commonly used for post-traumatic stress disorder. I went through prolonged exposure therapy, cognitive processing therapy, different types of talk therapy, stress inoculation training. I went through all kinds of rehabilitation. I did speech and language therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, cognitive rehabilitation therapy, nerve blocks to try to help with the pain. I had several different types of acupuncture, both for pain management and for psychological management. I did relaxation, meditation, music and art therapy, spirituality. I mean, if it was out there, I pretty much did everything that was available. Part of the challenge with that, I have 4 children, and my wife and children, they were paying a real price as well in the way that I was behaving at home. I really wasn't much of a father or a spouse at that time. And that was a story for about 3 years until I was really just struggling so much that they finally decided to do a TBI workout. For the first time, stuck my head under a scanner and found out, in fact, I had very substantial brain damage. I was really discouraged. It had nothing to look forward to but pain and challenges every day. It was in that time that a group called Stand for the Troops contacted me, and it was founded by a kind of real war hero that I had been familiar with, a guy named David Hackworth, one of the most decorated soldiers of all time, a veteran of World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And because of that, the background of the people that were involved with that group, I decided to trust them, and I talked to some doctors. They said, we have this therapy that is actually helping people with traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder, and we'd like to get you into it. And so they arranged with Dr. Paul Hartch, who's one of the leading practitioners of hyperbaric oxygen for traumatic brain injury, and they arranged for me to be treated by him. So improvement that I saw wasn't just subjective personal observation. We actually did functional brain scans before I started hyperbaric oxygen, and after 40 treatments, and then again after 80 treatments. And we saw substantial improvement in brain function in those scans. You can see it. It's something that I can see in the amount of blood perfusion in the brain, which is a direct indicator of brain activity, improved in a very significant, statistically significant amount. So we have both, imaging documentation of the improvement in my brain. It's been reviewed by some of the best imaging specialists in the country. So now after hyperbaric oxygen, I'm completely off all those drugs. Roughly 50% of veterans get a prescription from the VA for my injury profile for post-traumatic stress or the symptoms of traumatic brain injury that the VA publicly acknowledges are contraindicated for the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And they recognize they have negative impacts. Medical progress tends to follow the medical lobby. You have, with drugs, you have quite a pharmacology lobby and industry, and you have professions that's what they center around. And that's what they're used to dealing with. There aren't a lot of hyperbaric practitioners in the country, so it's kind of a small voice in the wilderness At this point, we've probably had about 3,000 veterans that have been treated by hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And all the success and improvement rates for those is incredibly high compared to any other therapy. And a number of states have taken their own steps. They've become so dissatisfied with the slow rate of change that they've started passing their own legislation providing treatment for veterans in those states. On the other hand, using hyperbaric oxygen to treat traumatic brain injury is common throughout the world. I mean, it's commonly used in China, it's commonly used in Russia, it's commonly used in England, throughout Europe, South America. It's matter of course there. It's used regularly in Israel, but not so much here. When we look at the cost of hyperbaric oxygen, if you took 10% of the VA's drug budget and used it for hyperbaric oxygen therapy at the Medicare rate of reimbursement, you could treat almost every veteran with traumatic brain injury. And you compare to the drugs. Take my case. On average, a person with my injury profile costs the VA over $15,000 a year just in medical treatment. So for that $15,000 every year, you could provide hyperbaric oxygen therapy for multiple veterans. And if you did it even at higher than Medicare reimbursement rates, that would still be less expensive than the VA's per soldier treatment costs. We did a case study with a non-profit clinic treating with the capability to treat up to 60 veterans at a time. It would be 360 veterans per year. And the cost per veteran to do 40 hyperbaric treatments would be less than $2,500. When we talk about what hyperbaric oxygen therapy has done for my life, I mean, we start using terms like miracle and amazing and incredible. After having gone through everything else that was available and seeing very little improvement, and being in a position where you just have no hope for the future, you're just pathetic. And then going through hyperbaric oxygen therapy, I saw dramatic reductions in pain. I saw dramatic improvements in kind of the amount of physical activity that I could do, reduction in the fatigue, improvement in my sleep. I think we could say every symptom that's associated with the traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder, I saw a substantial and significant improvement in. Can be a part of my community. I can be a part of my family. I'm a dad again. My kids like me. My wife actually likes me again. Our marriage is basically saved. I just like to say how personally grateful I am that Bingham Memorial Hospital is taken the lead in treating veterans with this incredible tool, this incredible healing tool, hyperbaric oxygen therapy. They've already done quite a bit. They've treated a number of veterans here at their own expense, at no cost to the veteran, and bringing those veterans a new life. I mean, it's something that I've said. I've heard other people that have been treated with hyperbaric oxygen therapy is I got my life back. Bingham Memorial Hospital is giving veterans their lives back. It hits me here to see the people here at Idaho Hyperbarics, their commitment to the men and women who served in uniform in our nation. That's when I joined the Army, that's one of the reasons I joined the Army. When I grew up here in southeast Idaho, people invested in me as an individual. And so I was proud to serve on their behalf in the United States Army. I was proud to go to Iraq and represent them, and to return home and to see those people here in southeast Idaho at Idaho Hyperbarics continuing to invest in not just in me, but in other men and women who served and who have suffered the wounds of war, the invisible wounds of war, and the amount of commitment and time that they invest and money that they invest to get those veterans their lives back is just, you know, that's what makes America great. That's what makes Idaho such a great state. And I can't tell you how proud I am when I found out we had a hyperbaric program here in southeast Idaho. You know, this is a great place to live, and it just reaffirms that this is just such a great area and great people.